The Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic concluded a 2-year investigation into COVID-19 and released a final report that's 520 pages. Senator, what exactly is this? What's new? What are the takeaways? Because you've been a dog with a bone about this one for 3 years now.
What made news is the fact that, they concluded that this was a virus that really emanated in some way, shape, or form from the Wuhan lab. And to which I just go, duh.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Right. And again, I think what I most object to is the conclusion that the vaccine saved millions of lives. That there's no science that backs that up. I think most people conclude that, very vulnerable populations, if it boosts their immunity, it might have saved some lives, but millions, while at the same time completely denying vaccine injuries. And they're now pointing to the study, for example, that mathematician Dennis Rancourt from Canada takes a look at and said, no, the vaccine probably caused 17 million deaths. Again, I don't know what the figure is. What I do know is our federal health agencies have completely covered up the fact that they well knew about vaccine injuries. They knew about myocarditis. They knew about this within months. And they literally, to this day, have still done nothing about it. They just continue to cover up and continue to push what I would consider a very dangerous mRNA injection. It's not a vaccine. It's an injection. It literally turns your body and its cells into a manufacturing site for something that is toxic to the body, that the body attacks. When the body attacks something, it creates inflammation. That's what myocarditis is. That's, attacks the spinal column and nerves. That's what all these neurological symptoms are. And now we know that it has DNA contamination, including the SV40 sequence, cancer causing. We're hearing about these turbo cancers. We hear about them, but the rest of the media is completely covering it up. And again, the federal health agencies are covering it up as well.
Okay, Senator, I want to play devil's advocate here. 3 years ago, the country is in a crisis. Everything is shut down. We didn't know what we didn't know. You've heard the spiel, right? Well, 6 feet, well, we hoped so. Well, the masks, well, we hoped so. And I could go so far. In other words, sir, I could say, I understand that you're acting on the side of caution to save lives, and you're finding all of this out in the free fall. But you were skeptical of this from the beginning. You were skeptical of the response across the board, from locking down schools, closing businesses, and then you were skeptical of the vaccine. What made you skeptical from onset? Because you took a hell of a lot of criticism for that position, and you turned out to be right, but how did you know?
I actually followed the science. So when John Ioannidis did an analysis of the Princess Cruise, we just had a perfect research study in that Princess Cruise, I think 700 some passengers. And John Ioannidis, a mathematician, I think doctor out in Stanford, analyzed that and basically concluded, the coronavirus is going to be dangerous if you're elderly, if you have certain comorbidities, but if you're young, if you're healthy, it'll be like possibly a bad flu. So I held a hearing in May with John Ioannidis, some other people, including Pierre Corey, by the way. First time I'd heard about him, I brought him on because at that point he was in New York. He was treating COVID patients, and they were looking at corticosteroids as a treatment in the hospital. And it was working. Of course, he got ridiculed and vilified for that until the study came out in dexamethasone from the UK and said, I guess corticosteroids works. But going back to John Ioannidis, I held a hearing in May of 2020 where I held the hearing to try and calm everybody down. Listen, I wasn't downplaying the fact that coronavirus could be a deadly disease, but again, it wasn't Ebola at 40% fatality rate. It's not MERS at 10%, or 30%. It's not, or whatever MERS was. It's not SARS at about 8.9%.
Right.
But this might be a bad flu season. That's what Oxford Center for Evidence-Based Medicine, that was their conclusion. It was certainly the conclusion John Ioannidis. So again, this is May of 2020. Now, I'd also been focusing on early treatment. As soon as I heard of hydroxychloroquine, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical researcher, I thought, hey, maybe we got something to treat this. Why aren't we focusing on treating the disease. So I was all for monoclonal antibodies, whatever would work. If hydroxychloroquine would work, now we had early indications from, study, I think, out of University of Michigan or I guess Henry Ford. So we were hearing these things would work. And I was actually talking to Novartis at that point in time. They're the manufacturers of hydroxychloroquine. They donated 30 million doses to the strategic reserve. And there was a logjam. Those things weren't getting out, but the CEO of Novartis, who I was texting all the time, was all excited about it. They were doing a bunch of studies that were going to be released in May. My biggest concern was, would we have enough? If there was a therapeutic, if there was a drug, will we have enough manufacturing capability? And this is in April, May of 2020, where I was focusing on early treatment. Then all of a sudden, by the end of April, my communication with the CEO of Novartis went dark. So last time I ever texted him, last time I ever talked to him, and this is about the same time that they decided on Operation Warp Speed and a vaccine, which, by the way, I was also supportive of. I didn't care what it took.
Right.
We had to get by this pandemic. Again, I was a lot calmer about it when I saw the Princess Cruise data that this was going to be like a bad flu. I'm just kind of on the hinge point there. About 65 years old, just sort of, I'm elderly, but I'm still healthy. But so I wasn't as freaked out about it as other people were. So I was a big supporter of Operation Warp Speed until I connected with Michael Yeadon, who worked for Pfizer for 30 years, ended his career as the vice president of research. His specialty is toxicology. He was no longer working for Pfizer. He was doing joint ventures with him. He's still in biologics and in the drug world. When he heard what Pfizer was going to do, what his former colleagues were proposing, he said, "Ron, there's a long list of ingredients we do not put into injectables because they're toxic to the body." When I heard my colleagues were going to produce an injection that was going to turn the body, the cell, into a manufacturing site for something that is toxic to it, he couldn't believe it. He literally couldn't believe it. He was beside himself. And then to make matters worse, they were going to encapsulate it in a lipid nanoparticle, which, by the way, Jillian, is designed to permeate difficult to permeate barriers, like the blood-brain, like the placental barrier.
Yes.
So again, he said, "Ron, I was educated with these people. I worked with them. I know that they know what I know. I know they're lying to us. I know they know they're lying to us, and they're still doing it. Why?" And this probably is October, November 2020. So at that point, I can guarantee you there was no way I was going to get that vaccine. But again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical researcher. I couldn't go out there and recommend against it because, I don't know, I don't have that expertise.
Right.
But what I could do is I could monitor the safety surveillance system, which, by the way, the FDA, CDC, they were touting before they got the emergency use authorization. In October, they put it like an 8-hour clinic, and they were just talking up the VAERS system, how they were going to be watching that like a hawk. If there was somebody that missed even time from work, they were going to have a CDC representative on the phone talking to that individual to find out what was happening. That was all, pardon my French, that was all total bullshit. Total bullshit, because they didn't follow up on it. So fast forward to about April of 2021. Now, we've been giving these vaccines primarily to the elderly because there was, supply restrictions.
Yes, I remember.
I think it was like 3,000 deaths already reported on the VAERS system. 46% of those deaths were occurring on the day of vaccination or on day 1 or day 2 following vaccination. So within 2 days of vaccination, 46% of those deaths were occurring within that time frame. Now, we were given to the elderly. They're more susceptible to the vaccine injuries. But I was with Francis Collins, the head of NIH, with a group of senators. Everybody else is patting themselves on the back. We got the test kits out there and you do a great job. And of course, I'm the skunk in the room going, "Dr. Collins, are you watching VAERS?" And I gave him those stats, and he goes, "Senator, we've attributed 6 deaths of childbearing age women associated with J&J with clotting, 6 deaths. So what about the other thousands?" And he just very callously said, "Well, Senator, people die." And that's pretty much the attitude that the CDC and our health agencies have been given to vaccine injuries ever since. When we held that event in June 2021 with the vaccine injured, at that point, all they wanted was to be seen and heard and believed so that they could get treatment, because they were all being blown off. They still are. The medical establishment does not recognize vaccine injuries. So these people horribly injured, so horribly injured that dozens have committed suicide. They're in such utter despair. By the way, even greater despair when Facebook shut down their support groups. Now they had nobody to talk to.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. And make sure to let me know what guests you want to see on in the future.